Hi, I'm Michael Matthews, the Improv GM, and today I want to talk to you about a not uncommon problem you find with new players, and that's the orphan loner characters. Now, I've already done a video on how that actually means you have to do more thought put into a backstory as opposed to less, but the reason this is a problem is something that is fixable. Look, I know there are people who enjoy adversarial styles of GMing, where the consequence for failure should at least possibly be death, and, really, play the way you want. But I really wish it wasn't a way people were introduced to the hobby, where it's not a choice of the game, it's a default. You have players who learn that if they don't play correctly in the style of the game, they're going to lose the character. But we often want our characters to identify with the players they've created and create a real person that they have a connection with. And while it's not in the scope of this video, my personal feeling is that death is generally the least interesting consequence. It closes doors and shuts off the story, especially if you run a character-dependent game like I do. But hey, there are wrong ways to play in my games too. If you're looking for a game with a lot of combat or one where you as a player don't have to be actively making decisions for your character, we're both gonna get bored. Now, if you love above all else that intricate puzzle that is a dungeon, I'm not going to give you what you're looking for. It's not my thing. But I do want to address something that can actually help all of us create more interesting characters and free players up, even in a cutthroat game, to creating NPCs that we care about. And that's pretty simple. Do not simply have NPCs exist to make them hostages. Particularly if you want someone to do something about their background and their story. Don't just put a red laser sight on all of their foreheads every time they're on screen. Listen, if the main interaction that they have is that they're being held under the knife, they're not going to invest in them. Now, Mel Gibson spent a decent chunk of the 90s trying to remake Braveheart. And when he remade it in Vietnam with We Were Soldiers, he trotted out a ton of tropes that made me disengage immediately. One of them, I think it was the guy from American Pie, early in the movie, showed a picture of his kid to someone and said, I haven't even seen her yet. But when I get out of here in a couple weeks, I get to go back home. He's gonna die. That character is only going to die, and that's the only thing that's going to happen when that is being said in a movie. It's a cheap way of getting us to care about a character so that somehow it's a tragedy. I'm sure at one point in time I was young enough that I fell for it, but I don't now. I see a big, huge neon sign telling us that this character is going to randomly die, not because of decisions they make, and I can't write that off as a tragedy. It's a storyteller using a cheap trick. Now, Armageddon used a similar thing, but it gave us a different decision that Bruce Willis's character got to make to sacrifice himself instead, when of course it was going to be so his daughter's husband was going to be the one who was going to die. It gave us that moment for him to make the decision where he died, and it was a tragedy. It wasn't a random thing, which the soldier saying, "This is my daughter, I've not seen her yet, and I get to go home soon." That person's probably not going to make a decision that he knows will cost him that. He's probably just going to get shot and killed because he gets shot and killed, and we're going to be like, oh, it's so sad. It's a cheap way of using them. Now, in Apollo 13, I know that they live. I know that those people are still alive, and they didn't burn up in the atmosphere. But there's a 3-minute blackout while that capsule comes to Earth that actually expands. I watched a little bit earlier. Even without the rest of the movie, it's heart-stoppingly tense. We see the fireball it's turned into on the way down, and the movie plays honestly with us. We get to see all the characters' tensions, people we've gotten to know, and importantly, people that care about the main characters that we've spent this time with. Once they go into the blackout, we don't see them. The terror and grief become a vehicle for us to feel the same tension, even though we know the Apollo 13 returned to Earth. If we hadn't met and cared about all these minor characters, it wouldn't have worked. We'd just be watching normal people watching their TV screens. Instead, we care because these people mean something to us. If American Pie from We Were Soldiers, I don't give a shit about this guy, because this director has just screamed at me he's going to die randomly, and we're not going to play fair with that character. So, your new player comes in, makes a character, and says, hey, their sister is really important to them. Cool, first adventure. She's kidnapped. Another campaign. My war buddies got me through hell. We're trying to keep myself strong. Cool. First adventure. You come home and they're all dead and there's a message to you on the wall in blood. Like, if they're just tragedy tokens, they lose any sense of tragedy and loss. It's something that hasn't been earned. And it's a bad spur to get the characters to go someplace. If you have to drop their parents into the middle of the thing, the problem is not player motivation. The problem is the players haven't bought into the thing that you're trying to do. Talk with your players. You don't need to use those kind of tricks. Now, for a better example, let's look at the Spider-Man, and in particular the new Spider-Man game. Now, his whole thing is that being a superhero messes up every aspect of his life at home. If you're playing that character, that's what you want out of the GM. That's specifically what you're asking for. Give me hard decisions, put me in places where being a superhero is going to cost me things in my real life, and trying to go with my real life is going to make me do things I can't live with if I don't be the superhero. And you want those choices between letting MJ or Aunt May down, and at times you want them in danger and you have to save them, but it can't be the only time they come into the game. The new Spider-Man game, for example, has a bunch of scenes where you get to see these characters interact with them, and they're not in danger. And I'm not spoiling anything to say that at least once, yes, they get into danger. And I'm not counting the really shitty non-Spider-Man stealth scenes. Game designers, stop putting in stealth if it ain't your thing. Particularly if it's like game over when you get caught. They suck, they're boring. I've never seen a game do it well. Stop it. But we get a lot of interactions with those characters that aren't about putting them in danger, but are about the relationships and how being Spider-Man complicates those. Mary Jane knows and Aunt May doesn't, so it gives us just two different sets of problems. The important thing is, though, there's plenty of scenes with them just about developing the characters and moving plot things along ahead that have nothing to do with a SWAT team about to come in and shoot them up. In an RPG, this is the characters getting to enjoy role-playing with those NPCs and getting to know them and their relationship. And that, in turn, helps define their own character. It adds the depth that gives them reasons to do other things that they want to do. But they have to feel safe. They can't feel like every time we see an important NPC, you're about to yell, "Roll initiative! We're going to go on this thing!" Make them feel safe so they can develop their character. Those breathers are excellent quiet moments to do all kinds of incredible things with the characters. But they gotta be able to relax. Now listen, I'm not saying not put them in danger sometimes. It's just that if they know that's the guarantee for any NPC who's important to them, it stops being tense. They need to be able to relax. This is where like writing books for film and novels fail RPGs. As a matter of fact, we use lots of advice from other sources, from other art forms that really break down in important ways when you actually apply them to role-playing games. It's one of the reasons where I think long-form improv in particular really works well, because it's similar in how it's being spun forward. It's just in long form, you're all sharing what would be sort of GM duties as well. Role-playing games are not movies or TVs. They're not set scenarios where you can go back and tweak it to make it work. Like in a film or novel, yeah, you're writing one story and there's good wisdom that like putting someone they love in danger gives this sense of personal connection and helps motivate them to get it right. But in role-playing games, everything is they're created in the moment, and some of those laws just don't work. Holly Gennaro being in Nakatomi Plaza and Die Hard works great because it gives higher stakes for John McClane to get it right. But there's a good chance your players are mostly looking forward to like fighting the big bad at the end of whatever the thing is you're doing. They don't need their cousin at the end to make it matter. If they need something like that to spur them on with NPCs all the time, find out what actually interests them and start letting them lead the momentum of the story. You get to be surprised. Enjoy those moments where you get to like slow it down, just being the NPCs, playing with these characters, developing them, creating relationships that mean something, so that way, when you are much later on, you're going to be shocked and surprised. Story elements that can happen just because these characters mattered and developed in ways you weren't expecting them to develop. So listen, hope to help. If you've got any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them below. Hit subscribe or share, and I will see you another time.